Praise the Lord, everyone. Let's stand. We're going to pray. We're going to ask the Lord to help us this morning in Sunday school and in our morning service. And we are going to believe that the Lord's going to do great things. Amen? Amen. Praise God. Let's pray together. God, we love you. Magnify your name. Hallelujah. Oh, Jesus, we love you. Thank you for your mercy and your grace. Thank you for the opportunity to be in your house today, God. We love you. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Have your way this morning, God. Praise God. Praise God. You can be seated. If you shake somebody's hand, tell them it's good to see him. Brother Zane, you got my slides? We are talking this morning about friendship. Friendship's an important aspect in life. The Bible lets us know that no man is an island unto himself. And we have to have friends. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to be, more than anything else, I guess, how to be a good friend. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." The story and the lesson. Sometimes I like these stories, sometimes I don't. I kind of like this lesson this morning. I wish I could tell stories the way whoever writes these lessons writes them up. It's interesting. Is the story in the student book? No? Oh, good. Then I should never have told you that somebody else did these. I should have told you that I did these stories. So the way that the lesson story starts out tells us that these men all grew up in the same village. It was a small community. Everybody knew each other. Wasn't much happened that somebody didn't know, and it wasn't long till everybody knew. Social media was big in their village. Their favorite app was face-to-face conversation along the path to the local market. They always shared the latest news by the well. They gathered water every day in the same well, and they all drank from the same well. They sought the same shady spots to rest, and when they got there, they met friends every day, and they chatted with them. And on those occasions, they would share the stories of what was going on with their families. Some of them, sometimes it was a little gossip of what was going on at the neighbor's house, you know. They talked about whether it was going to rain or who's seeing who and whose daughter's dating whose son and all that kind of junk, who was sick. So when one of the friends showed symptoms of a physical weakness and a debilitating paralysis that claimed the strength of his muscles, the news quickly spread. The man in the story in the Gospels that was carried up onto the rooftop, the Bible doesn't say he was born lame. He was just a lame man. So something happened in his life, and fortunately for that young man, he had 4 loyal friends that continued to make time for him. They stopped by, talked to him, shared their latest mischief, take him out on the cot out into the sun, get a little bit of sun outside. On one day, when they were with him, the word came that there was a man, a rabbi, his name was Jesus, and he was coming to their synagogue, and everybody in town was going to go, and they all wanted to see him. And the man that was lame heard that he could heal people, and so he asked his friends if they would take him. And they thought it would be a perfect opportunity to take their friend to Jesus. Maybe they could meet him. Maybe Jesus could heal him. When they got to the synagogue or the building, it was full. A lot of buildings in Israel even still have outside steps that go up the side of the building onto the roof so that you can get on the roof, and most of the roofs are flat. You can dry grain or you could dry clothes in the heat of the sun. And so it wasn't as major a deal as we think, but nonetheless, it was a big deal to get him and then put him on the roof. The 4 friends took him up, and they agreed that they would head to the roof, and they held on to the cot, struggling to keep their balance. Well, I went to Israel one time. Tell you a little story in the middle of this, all right? And we decided, I went with Dennis Croucher. Brother Croucher was a presbyter in the district and moved to Tennessee, and he was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and organized trips. I think he's been to Israel maybe 30 times. That's a lot of times. So he organized a trip to Israel, and in this particular trip, we went to Mount Sinai. And so I rode a camel halfway up Mount Sinai, and then I walked the rest of the way. Mount Sinai is a mountain of granite. It's all granite. It is all granite. And it's a little precarious. We walked up to Mount Sinai at about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning in the dark. And it was pitch black in the Sinai desert. And the steps are jagged and small and uneven. Some of them, they're not really steps. They're rocks they're just flat rocks that they put out. And so we got up there and we sat out, and our group went, and we got in a little spot, and we prayed and we sang on Mount Sinai where Moses got the law. And I watched the sun come up over the Sinai desert. Saw the same sun come up that Moses saw come up over the Sinai. Very cool for me, you know, preacher stuff. That's very amazing to be on that mountain where Moses got the law. The finger of God wrote in one of those granite stones and gave Moses the 10 Commandments. But on the way down, Brother Croucher somehow slipped on one of those rocks, one of those steps, and fell about 12 feet on that granite and hit his head and busted his head open and couldn't move his arm and was unconscious for 20, 30 minutes and incoherent all the way down the mountain. So there was a group of us, and there just so happened to be a doctor. I mean, there was 250 people. Somebody probably pushed him accidentally. I don't think it was on purpose, but somebody probably bumped him or pushed him, and he fell. There was a doctor, examined him and said, he's got to get off this mountain. So, I mean, he's got physical problems. He's got to get off this mountain. So there were about 14 of us in our group, and we had to get him off the mountain. And so there was 6 of us that we just decided we're going to pick him up, and we cradle carried him, and then we'd trade off, you know. And we got so on the way up the mountain, it's like anything else. There are Bedouins that have little shops set up. And they sold candy bars, and they sold pop, and they sold water. And about a third of the way down, one of the Bedouins had an old lawn chair. And I negotiated to buy an old lawn chair for $20. And we bought a lawn chair and put him on the lawn chair, and it made it easier for us to carry him down. I thought he was going to die going down that mountain. And I prayed all the way down that mountain silently, oh God, don't let Brother Croucher die on the way down this mountain. Now remember, I was there at like 6 o'clock in the morning when the sun was coming up. At 2:30 that afternoon, we got down the mountain. It took us about an hour and a half to get up the mountain. But at 2:30 that afternoon, we got down the mountain, and there was an ambulance that had been sitting there almost all day because somebody that had gone down and gotten down earlier said there's a man that was very badly hurt. They took him to a hospital. It was the filthiest building I've ever been in my life, at a little place called St. Catherine's at the base of Mount Sinai. Sister Croucher, they wanted to give him shots and all kinds of stuff. Sister Croucher said, you're not sticking anything in him. Take an x-ray. If his bone's not broken, we're leaving here. We were on our way to Cairo, Egypt. Well, we prayed. Thank the Lord, nothing was wrong. His shoulder was a little dislocated. He had a mild concussion, but he didn't die. But he didn't ever made it off of that mountain if he didn't have friends. And when I think about the paralyzed man that got up on the roof, I always think about the 4 or 6 of us that carried Brother Croucher dead weight down that mountain. on those steps that you could barely walk on anyway. One person, it was tough walking on, and there were 4 of us trying to weasel down there carrying a man that was unconscious. Friends are an important thing. These 4 guys carried this man up onto that roof, and they clung to that cot, and they struggled to keep their balance while they climbed up those narrow steps. And they were trying to hear what Jesus was saying as he was teaching. And they began removing the roofing material once they got up there. And they created a space big enough to let the cot that bore their friend down into the room near where Jesus was teaching. Must have been quite a spectacle to see because, dust and particles and things were falling on people down below, and they're looking up, and all of a sudden they see a hole open up in the middle of the roof. And those 4 faces peered down into that packed room as the hole got bigger. The room was probably packed, but as the cot was lowered from the ceiling, people began to push back to make room for the paralyzed man to come down through the roof. When Jesus saw their faith, when Jesus saw the faith of the 4 friends that had gone to such great lengths to bring the man to him, he said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And while they'd hoped that their friend might be healed, no one expected that Jesus would not only heal him, but forgive his sins. An ironic thing, I heard somebody preach about it. I don't know why I didn't think about it first. But I heard somebody preach about it. The 4 friends are unnamed. We don't still to this day know the names of the 4 friends that lowered the paralyzed man to Jesus. They didn't care that their names were recorded in a book that would sell more copies than any other book in the world, in the history of the world. They just lowered him down because he was their friend and they were his friend. Jesus took the opportunity when they did that for a teaching moment to demonstrate an important lesson. He read their thoughts and he answered their accusations, and he said, "I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth, not just to heal, but to forgive sins." And then he stretched forth his hands and spoke, and he said, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." Overjoyed, the 5 friends left the house of healing differently than any of them had arrived. All 5 felt differently, not just the man that was healed. They laughed, they walked, excited to share the events of the day, and moment by moment they rejoiced in the restoration of their friend. Loyal friends are constant, and loyal friends are consistent. Friends that are loyal in times of adversity are the most meaningful, and friends that are friends in time of adversity are a treasure. They're a treasure. They're a treasure to have. Friendships are important in our lives, and they're vital in our social relationships. Now, we're not probably going to shout, and there probably won't be a message in tongues and interpretation this morning talking about friendship. But friendship's important, and it's a good part of discipleship, because before we can ever win someone's soul, we have to win their trust. And we have to probably become their friend even before we can explain things to them. Because, it's an old cliche, but it's really true. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. Right? And so friendship is that caring part of a relationship. Jesus modeled the value of friendship, of relationship, by developing friendship among his disciples. In John 15:15, Jesus said this, "Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you." Jesus purposely called his disciples friends. He didn't call them servants, although really they were servants of the Lord, and we are servants of the Lord. But we sing that chorus, or we used to a lot. We don't sing it as much anymore, but we sing that chorus sometimes, I am a friend of God. Abraham was a friend of God. We need to be friends of God. God needs to be our friend. Friendship's an important thing. You need to choose your friends. I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but you need to choose your friends wisely and carefully. Jesus didn't call his disciples servants. He elevated them to a relationship of affection. And that became the pattern for us so that we can effectively develop discipleship in the local church. It's got to be based. The local church is really based on the relationship that we have. Let me go all the way back to Isaiah. When Isaiah realized that he needed God, in Isaiah 6, he said, in the year that King Uzziah died, Uzziah and Isaiah were friends. Isaiah looked up to Uzziah. Uzziah was that voice in Isaiah's life. And when Uzziah died, Isaiah didn't have that voice in his life. And he said, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. So there's a principle that we got to look at there. God's elevated. God's high and lifted up. And I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. And he said there was an angel of the Lord that came. And he said, God, I don't know what I'm going to do. Uzziah's dead. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm a man of unclean lips. And he said, I dwell in the midst of an unclean people. So his first vision was God, where God needs to be. And then when he looked out, he saw in that horizontal look, man, I got a mess on my hands here, and I don't know what to do, and Uzziah's not here to give me any kind of direction. And an angel came and grabbed a coal from off of the altar and touched his lips. And the Lord said, I need somebody that will go and speak to these people for me. Who will go? And when Isaiah saw God the way that God was supposed to be, and he saw his relationship with mankind the way that was supposed to be, suddenly Isaiah got a vision of what he was supposed to do, and he said, here am I, Lord, send me. So we've got to always maintain the perspective that God requires of us in our relationships. God always has to be high and lifted up. So in any relationship that I've got, any relationship, any friendship that I've got, my friends and my friendship activities and the activities of life should never be more important than my relationship with God. My relationship with God is elevated above everything else. Because if I gain the whole world and I lose my soul, I haven't gained anything. So I've got to get my relationship with God right. But the thing that we got to understand about this is, even with a relationship with God, I've got to have a relationship with other people, because no man is an island unto himself. Just because you're saved, you cannot develop the mindset that you're better than everybody else, and that you can't have anything to do with anybody else, and that you're afraid if you rub shoulders with somebody who doesn't know anything about God, it'll rub off on you and you'll be dirty. You can't develop that kind of an attitude. Jesus, we got to realize, to develop followers into disciples, we first have to develop acquaintances into friends. We have to develop them into friends. The thing that people should say most about our services, about our church, two things. I feel the presence of God. God high and lifted up. And second, they're friendly around there. Our vertical and horizontal relationships have to be in the right order. The very first thing ought to be, man, I felt the presence of God. But then the very next thing out of their mouth ought to be, man, they're really nice people there. They're friendly people. Because we're emerging, all of us are, and as emerging disciples of Jesus, would we be called fair weather followers, or would we be called faithful friends? I want to be a faithful friend of Jesus. Real friendships are reflective of enduring relationship. Jesus developed among his followers during his earthly ministry. Friends don't abandon friends. Friends don't leave when things get tough. Now, I'm going to make a couple statements. We have to be careful. Friends tell friends the truth, but they tell them the truth in love. You can't be mean when you're telling somebody something that you know they don't want to hear. When you know they don't want to hear it, that's the time when you say, sit down and get a cup of coffee and let me put my arm around you here. Sometimes you got to tell them, let me first tell you, I love you. And I'm only telling you this because I'm worried about you. It's not an opportunity for you to tell somebody how much smarter you are than they are when you see them in trouble. And they need your expert advice on life. Right? Because not all friends can be faithful friends. Some people hang around as long as they're on the receiving end. There's a pattern. You can see it. There are some people. My wife went to a ladies' conference one time, and they were talking about helping people. We need to try to help everybody we can help. But we also need to be smart enough to see that there are some folks. Now, I'm going to say this, and some of you are going to think I'm terrible, and you're just going to have to pray through. All right? But there are some folks that are buckets full of holes. And it doesn't matter how much you pour into them, it's not your fault that they don't receive it all the time, because sometimes their bucket's just full of holes. And it doesn't matter how much you pour in, you're never going to fill them up, because it leaks out as quick as you pour it in. And there are other people that just suck things up. They just, there are people who have, I'm not doing, this isn't psychology class, but it's just a fact. There are people that have low self-esteem. And it doesn't matter how much you tell them they're nice, they're never going to believe they're nice, because somebody in their life told them they were bad, and they believed that, and that's all that they're going to hear. There are people that have been abused, and there are issues in their lives, and that's not their fault. But they can't accept friendship because of the abuse that they can't get close to people because they can't trust people, because everybody that they've let into their life has abused them. And you have to be careful that you don't smother somebody like that, because your attempts to try to become a friend to them pushes them away because of fear that's in their life. And so we kind of have to be careful about how, because some people, you know, you may not understand, you may not know everything they went through, and you try your natural smothering mode to be friends, and they've gone through things in their life that they can't take that, and all of a sudden, you know, you come to Brother Long and say, I tried to be their friend, and they ran away, and now they won't even answer their phone, and they don't return text. I don't know what I did. And I don't have the heart to tell you, you're a smotherer. I can't tell you, you're a smotherer. You make me nervous. You know, you make me nervous. I like to have friends. But I'm one of those guys that's got personal space. I got personal space. So I don't like people. I just don't like, if you watch me, I don't like to get around people that are like, man, it's good to see you, Brother Fuller. Did you see Brother Fuller when I got up? Did you see him? He back. You know why? Because he's got personal space. I like you, but right here, this is good right here. We can still reach each other, still shake hands, but I can't smell your cat poo breath, right? That's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of where I'm at. So we have to be careful of how it all goes, right? We have to be careful about how we read. Everybody can't be. That's what we've got to understand. Everybody can't be a faithful friend. Some people are just going to hang around us as long as they can receive things. And when the blessings run dry, their commitment is revealed, and fair weather friendships dissolve into the background, and they look for the new best thing, the new next thing. Somebody else that's going to tell them all about how wonderful they are. Somebody else that's going to give them all the stuff that they want, because now you're telling them, hey, we love you, but there's some things you need to change in your life if you're going to be a follower of Jesus. And they run off to somebody who tells them it's easier. It just happens. There are people that are like that There are just folks that are like that. We're talking about friends this morning. That's what this lesson's about, friendship. Even among followers of Jesus Christ, there are fair weather followers. We live, and it's our fault, it is society's fault, but we live in a day where there is an entire segment of society that believes in entitlement. We live in a day where an entire segment, and it's cross-cultural, it crosses genetics, it crosses sexual distinctions. It doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, yellow, red. It doesn't matter if you're green. We might find out if they really invade Area 51 that there are little green men running around, and they might free them, and they may all run around our country, and we may have to put them on welfare. We don't know what's going to happen with Area 51. But we live in an age where people feel entitled to things, and as long as there are entitlements, as long as you're handing them things, they're happy. As long as they're getting their entitlement, they're satisfied. You know, I said I should be president because I could fix this welfare stuff. You know, you can have welfare. You can get welfare. But once you go on welfare, you can't have any more kids out of wedlock. Number one. Number one. Number two, those kids that are on those welfare things have to go to school every day. They don't go to school, you don't get your money for them. Number three, they got to make at least a C. They don't make good grades, you don't get money for them. They're not just going so you can collect the check. Number four, they can't be truant. They get in trouble with the law, you lose. You know what? That puts personal responsibility on mom and dad. On mom, because dad's not around. Most of the time, dad's not around. And we're going to give you a 2-year degree. You have 3.5 years to go to college and get a 2-year degree. And then after you get your degree, you got 6 months to get a job, and you're off welfare. Well, I can fix a whole social problem. I could do it. Just vote for me. I'll be a write-in 2020, all right? But we live in a world that's this entitlement thing. Not all friends are going to be faithful. There's no shortage of friends when the prodigal son has all the money in his pocket. There's no shortage of friends when he says, come and go with me to the bar, we're going to have a great time. There's no shortage of friends when he says, oh, hey, drinks are on me, I'm buying rounds for everybody. There's no shortage of friends then. But when his money runs out, he finds himself in the hog pen and eating the husks that the swine did eat. Life was a party when he had money. Everything was good. And probably a lot of those folks that were with him, he called them friends. He probably called them his friends when they were all partying with him. But when his money ran out and he got on his phone and called them, they didn't answer the phone. They didn't answer. Or they were texted back, hey, sorry, just too busy today. And we're going to have people that we're going to have so-called friends that are going to be like those friends of the prodigal. They're only friends for what they can get out of a relationship. They're not really friends at all. And as long as the wayward son had money and he bankrolled every party and was passing out gifts, friends were plentiful. And his popularity was celebrated. But as soon as his funds ran low, parties were canceled and the prodigal needed a place to stay, all of his friends were gone. Faithful friends are friends that are consistent throughout the ebb and flow of life events, no matter what happens. I don't talk about this a lot. I just don't talk about this a lot. But several years ago, it's been, I don't know, probably 12 years ago now. Just about a month ago, from today almost, was on a Saturday. I was here at the church working, fiddling around, working on some things here at the church. And I got a phone call from our best friend's wife, my best friend's wife. She was our best friend. And Dee said, "Oh, Terry, please, you got to come. My Ronnie, please come." And so I hopped in my car and I shot up to the campground, and Brother Jacob was there, and I said, "You probably want to come with me. We got to go to Newcastle." And we went to, I can't remember the name of the man's house. Who was it? Yeah, they were cutting a tree, and Ron Perry was in a bucket truck cutting tree limbs down, helping a friend who couldn't get in the bucket truck cut limbs out of the tree that were in high tension wires. And he got into the 3-phase high tension wires, and they're bare. They don't have insulation on them. And somehow they think maybe something went wrong with the bucket, but that bucket just kept going up, and it got him close to that wire, and the magnetism from that wire, the electromagnetism from that wire pulled him up, and it hit him in the back of the head. And thankfully, he died instantly. But I lost my best friend that day. I lost my best friend. And I'm going to tell you, my life really hasn't ever been the same since I lost my best friend. I like to be around people. I like to have friends. But for a long time, I was extremely cautious about reaching out because I lost my friend, my best friend. I was at the North American Missions Board of Directors meeting, and I took a bag. We've cleaned our office, and I took a bag that I hadn't carried in probably 8 or 10 years with my laptop and everything in it to those Board of Directors meetings. And I saw a piece of paper in that bag, and I pulled it out, and it was the notes from what I spoke at Ron's funeral. And I just sat and read through it. A good friend is irreplaceable. You don't just replace your best friend. I remember my grandpa Fullwider passed away in 1977, and I was 17, and Grandma lived in a little white house. Grandma and Grandpa bought a house on Walnut Street that I was born in. Mom and Dad lived in that house, and I lived there, and then later on in life, Grandma and Grandpa bought that house, and they lived there. And I think Grandma cried after Grandpa passed away. I think Grandma cried just about every day. Every time I'd go over there, sometimes Mom would say, "Well, I can't get over there today. Can you go check on Grandma?" And so I'd go over and I'd sit and talk to Grandma for a little while. And every time I went over there, somehow in the course of the day, Grandma and Grandpa had been married for, how long were they married? 55, 6 years? They were childhood sweethearts. My grandpa's first girlfriend was my grandma in kindergarten. And they loved each other all through their lives. And then they got married, and they were married for 50-some years. And my grandma cried almost every day, "I miss Glennie. Oh, I miss Glenn." A good friend is just hard to replace. And faithful friends are those friends that are consistent through the ebb and flow of life events. We did everything with Ron and Delilah Perry. One year we went to Ron bought a custom van. You know, they used to sell those great big vans with all the seats and the TVs and everything in it. Ron bought one. Guess what Terry did? I bought one. And we took off one year to General Conference. Brother and Sister Leonard were with us. Brother Leonard had a pickup truck that had a bed liner over the top of it, and they made a bed in the back of theirs, and they would climb through the window from the seat of the truck in and out of that. So they had a custom van, sort of, too. And we took off one year to General Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah. All of us, Ron and Dee and Natalie and Amanda, and then it was me and my wife And Amanda and Ashley and brother and sister Leonard and Judy, and we all took off 3 vehicles, cruising down I-70, got to Des Moines, Iowa, and my van quit running. And I didn't hardly have any money. And we were there like on Saturday, and we took it to the Ford dealership, and they fiddled around. I had a big old Ford van. They fiddled around and tried this and tried that. And Ron called the local church, and Sunday morning, Ron preached at, I know his name just as well as I know. Anyway, Ron preached at the local church. The pastor paid him $400. You know what Ron did with the $400? Ron gave it to me to get my van fixed. And so Monday, they finally figured out Monday that I had 2 fuel filters in line on my truck or on my van. And one of my fuel filters was completely clogged, the secondary one that they hadn't checked before. And they found it, put a new fuel filter on, off we went to Salt Lake City. Well, my best friend, when I was pinching pennies, paid to get my van fixed. So sometimes when people have trouble with things, I remember what my friend did for me. And so I like to try sometimes, every once in a while, to help a friend. And I've got other friends that have done amazing things for me. I wrecked a car. That's a long story. I wrecked a car. It wasn't even really my fault, but I wrecked a car. And, man, I didn't know what we were going to do. And Tim did, and he gave me money to get my car fixed, pay my deductible to get my car fixed. Because that's what friends do. That's what friends do. Faithful friends are important, and they're the people that are consistent through the ebb and flow. They're not just your friends when you got money and you can throw the party and everything's good. But they're the friends when you wake up and you find yourself in the pig pen. Sometimes family doesn't even. Because when the prodigal went home and dad said, my son who was dead is now alive, let's kill the fatted calf. His brother said, I don't know why you're throwing a party for him, I've been here all along. And the dad had to remind him, the father had to remind him, everything that I have belongs to you, but this is your brother who we thought was dead and he's alive. We need to celebrate for him. Sometimes family's not going to be even the closest friend. Peter was the disciple that Jesus gave the keys to the kingdom to. Peter was that one that he gave the keys to the kingdom to. But I'm going to tell you something. And that's important. But the one, good friends can become great friends when they share life together. And a man that hath friends has to show himself friendly. It takes time to develop friendship. Got to be careful of anybody. I'm going to go back to Peter in a minute. Got to be careful of those people that instantly claim to be your best friend forever. Sometimes you got to watch for people like that. Sometimes there are just some people in the world that have problems. So we just kind of have to be careful. Loyal friends will go the extra mile. They'll do above and beyond what's expected. And loyal friends become like family members. We did and do a lot of things with my kids. They've never expressed to me that they get wore out. But my wife and I will often open up our home to people that we're trying to befriend, and my kids are expected to accept them. There's not been too many times, really, throughout our life that we haven't had somebody living in our house that needed help. Now, I'm not telling everybody they need to do that, but, and a couple of those people were people that were buckets full of holes. But we tried anyway. Amen. We tried because we believed in them, and we believed that God could use them, and we believed that we saw something that if we could pull that out of them, it could be something that could help. Life always has problems to share, but loyal friends are people that are always there through everything. Peter was the one that Jesus gave the keys to the kingdom to. Who do men say that I am? Peter spouted off, thou art Christ, the Son of the living God. Who do you say I am? He said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Blessed art thou, Jesus said, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood hasn't revealed that to you, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Whatsoever you loose on earth, loosed in heaven. Bound on earth, bound in heaven. Go, baptize every creature. Tell them good news. Jesus gave the keys to the kingdom to Peter. But watch this. When Jesus, therefore, saw his mother, when he's hanging on the cross, nails in his hands and his feet, Peter was not there. And when Jesus, therefore, saw his mother and the disciple standing by who he loved, he said to his mother, woman, behold thy son. And then he said to that disciple who he loved, behold thy mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her unto his own home. He gave his mother, when he could not care for his mother any longer, he didn't, there's something about real friendship. Peter was boisterous and loud and brash enough that Jesus knew he could give the keys to the kingdom to him. And once he got all of this stuff figured out, nothing would sway him from preaching the gospel. But when he wanted someone to take care of his mother, he didn't give it to the man that was brash and loud and almost sometimes maybe even obnoxious. He gave his mother to the disciple that he loved. You got to understand, Jesus gave his mother away. He said, woman, behold thy son, behold thy mother. He gave her away. He gave his mother on the cross when he died. He entrusted John with the care of his mother. I can't take care of her anymore. I'm not going to be here. You've got to do it. And you know what John did? And from that hour, that disciple took her unto his own home. My kids make jokes. I got 4 kids. They make jokes. When I'm old and, in a nursing home, I better be nice to them, because when I'm old in a nursing home, who's going to take care of me? And I look at Amber, TJ, and Ashley, and I say, I'm not being nice to you because you won't take care of me, and I know it. Because you're the Peters in my life. You're the brash, loud, obnoxious ones. But Mandy will wipe my hind end when I need somebody to. And Amanda tells all of them, you better be nice to me, because whatever Dad amasses in his life, I'm going to get it all. Jesus gave his mother to John. He gave his mother to John. John was always a loyal friend. John was always a loyal friend. Jesus' instruction, he said, but I've prayed for you that your faith fail not, and when thou art strengthened, he told Peter, or when thou art converted, strengthen the brethren. But he spoke, John was more in tune with the love concept of what God was. He said, I'm going to give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. He talked to Peter about the message. He spent time talking to Peter about strengthening the brethren, but doing it through the preaching of the Word of God. And he talked to Peter at length about his position and purpose in the gospel. because that's what Peter was going to do. But he talked to John about love. Love. Love's reciprocal. You can't always just receive it. You got to give it back. Love's a reciprocal thing. You got to give it back. And when he talked to John, when Jesus talked to John, he talked to John about love. He said, I'm going to give you a new commandment. It's not like the 10 commandments about what you can and can't do and where you can and can't go and what days you can and can't work. He said, I'm going to give you a new commandment. You need to love. You need to love one another. He showed us how to be loyal friends Jesus did, by being one himself. And that was the new commandment that he gave. Jesus' fellowship was marked by love. And his disciples would be known by their treatment of one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples. Now, love doesn't, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to be done. Love doesn't hide the truth because you don't want to hear the truth. And love doesn't not talk about issues that need to be talked about because you're hard-headed and you don't want to hear it. Love will tell the truth, but it will tell it in a loving manner. Jesus gave his mother away. In effect, I suppose Jesus could have hung her on the cross and he said, now look, Mom, I'm dying on this cross, and I've taken care of you for 3.5 years, and everywhere I've gone, you've eaten the food that all of the miracles, and you were the one that started me in all of this junk. You're the reason I'm hanging here. If you hadn't have told those people at that marriage to give me that water, we wouldn't be here. So now you've followed me, and you've been my responsibility, and I've got to find somebody that'll take care of you. So sit there until I do. And Jesus didn't say any of that, but all that's true. And he didn't tell John, look, I've trained you, and I've taught you, and I've shown you everything I know, and you know me, and you love me, and this is my mother, and you're my friend, and you're obligated to take care of my mother. And that's probably true. But that's not the way Jesus handled it. And sometimes that's the way we like to tell people things. You know what you ought to be doing. You just need to do what you're supposed to do. Instead of putting an arm around it and praying, telling them, I'm just praying for you. I know you're going through a hard time, and I just want you to know there's somebody that loves you. Amen. Sometimes when I know, because I'm a carnal man, I'm just natural. I'm as normal as anybody else. Sometimes when I know that somebody else knows what's going on, it just makes me feel better knowing that somebody said, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. So we got to be careful in how we handle friendships. But Jesus' instruction was that we love one another, and we've got to love one another, and we've got to make sure that our love is a transparent love. On his way to the feast in Jerusalem, stand with me, we're going to quit. Jesus passed a man near the pool of Bethesda. For 38 years, this man had been an invalid. And the belief was that an angel of the Lord would come and stir the waters of the pool. And whenever that happened, the first person that stepped into the pool got their healing. And there were people that would gather and they would jockey for position around that pool. And Jesus asked the man in John chapter 5, do you want to get well? And the man began to tell Jesus his sad story. And he concluded his sad story with, even if I was right there by the pool, I don't have anybody to help me into the pool when the water stirred. And he was envisioning the moment of the miraculous, but in despair, he recognized he could never be the first one in the pool because he didn't have friends to help him get him there. It's a sad contrast to the story of the paralyzed man that had 4 friends that lowered him down through the roof. Went to all those lengths to make sure. This man, all he needed was somebody to kick him in the water. And he didn't have anybody that would even take their foot and roll him into the water first. And the other guy had 4 friends. This man at the pool of Bethesda didn't have any friends that would stay with him. They weren't concerned about his welfare. They weren't concerned about his opportunity for a miracle. Fortunately for him, the miracle worker had come his way, and he stopped by the mat where the man was laying. And before him stood the one that could perform the miracle that he needed so desperately. Wasn't any miraculous sign. The water didn't have to ripple. No stirring, no angel's visit. Jesus just said, get up, pick up your bed, go home. He was instantly healed. He stood up, picked up his mat, and he walked. You never know when you're going to be able to help somebody. We need to cultivate friendships so that somebody can be present when they need us the most. We need to strive to be the friend that is there when somebody needs help. When we've invested time and given ourselves in friendships, we can expect other people will be there for us when we need a friend if we do the same. Because freely you have received, freely give. We need friends. And we need to be, in some instances, cautious about our friends. But when we're giving friendship out, we need to maybe be just a little reckless in letting people be our friend. Because we never know who it is we're reaching to. Bruce Howe is the global missions director for the United Pentecostal Church. Wasn't raised in Pentecost, doesn't have a blue blood lineage. He was a Sunday school bus kid in Heron, Illinois. They picked him up on a bus and brought him to church when his mom and dad didn't come. And he's the global missions director for the United Pentecostal Church. You just don't know who it is. You don't know what we're doing. So we need to be friends. Good friends. Loyal friends. That's what we need to be. Amen. I've gone way long. It's about 7 minutes till. We'll probably take 10 minutes. We'll probably start late. We start late anyway. You know we do. So if you want coffee or something, you can go out there to the coffee shop and get whatever it is. Let somebody know you love them. And we'll start morning worship. Amen.